Based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies to begin the process of identifying and releasing government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, and unidentified flying objects, UFOs, and any and all other information connected to these highly complex but extremely interesting and important matters. God bless America. President Donald J. Trump, February 19, 2026. G'day and welcome to the Paul Wallis channel. I'm Paul Wallis of The Fifth Kind, Ancient Knowledge Academy, author of the Eden series. And I want to give my initial comment on this announcement from President Trump regarding disclosure of ET contact. Why has this announcement been made? What is in the announcement? And what can we expect from it? Why has this announcement been made? Many people will say, surely this is simply intended as a distraction from the Epstein Files. The administration wants to move the public conversation away from that territory and onto something else, and would rather we talk about something else. Here is something else to grip the public imagination. And yes, I can well believe that that is part of the motivation behind this announcement. But there's another reason as to why now. In recent days, President Obama was on the No Lie podcast. And in a rapid exchange with host Brian Tyler Cohen, he was asked about aliens. "Oh, they're real," he said. And then added, "I haven't seen them." And then he says, and they're not in underground bases in Area 51 unless there's an enormous conspiracy and the president has not been told, as if such a thing were possible. He then had to walk back on those comments and say, well, of course they're out there somewhere. Mathematically, there must be aliens out there. And he tried to walk back on his statement, "Oh, they're real," but that is definitely what he said. And then President Trump made his comment saying that President Obama had given away classified information. And in making that statement, he was in fact endorsing the statement that aliens are real, but that President Obama shouldn't have said anything. So President Trump has been under some pressure to make a statement following on from that one. So there may be a couple of reasons as to why now. Some people have contacted me distressed because they feel this is going to take attention away from the Epstein Files. We need to see prosecutions. We need to see justice for the victims. And we need to come to an understanding of why our elites and those who govern us are bound together in activities rooted in sadism and cruelty. Why is that the thing that binds them together? Where has that culture come from? And I think it's right that we campaign for scrutiny and accountability of these matters, and I wouldn't want any distraction from that either. But I recently wrote a book called The Invasion of Eden. Did our ancestors warn us about ET invasions? And is history repeating itself in the 21st century? And in that book I show that these very dark connections that bind elite groups together, that characterize their behavior behind closed doors, is connected with the question of contact and contact in the deep past. Others are concerned that because of all the noise around the Epstein Files and the campaign for disclosure of those files, that maybe the proper attention won't be paid to these questions of alien and ET contact. So what can we expect from the announcements to follow this Truth Central tweet from the president? Well, firstly, he says, based on the tremendous interest shown, I will be directing the Secretary of War and other relevant departments and agencies. Now, there are at least 18 departments and agencies comprising the wider community of military intelligence for the USA. And one of the issues is that those departments operate strictly within silos. They exercise subsidiarity and compartmentalization of information. They don't all tell each other all their information. And so this unit over here may be researching UAP phenomena, but they're not allowed data regarding UAPs that this unit has over here. And this was the problem that led to the complaint from David Grush, who had been blocked in the task assigned to him of assessing UAPs and advanced aerial threat identification. His complaint was taken to ISIG, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, who found his concern that information was being withheld from department to department and withheld from Congress on an illegal basis. Thomas Monheim, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community, found that complaint to be credible and urgent. Well, now Pete Hegseth and President Trump are going to come up against the same problem. Can they simply ask secret services to tell all their secrets? Now, in theory, the secret services of the USA owe their allegiance to the people of the United States of America. And in a way, this is a similar device that secret services use in the UK, where a prime minister cannot demand information from secret services because they owe their allegiance to the crown. And so the president and Secretary of War may simply find that they are not given all the information that they are requesting. And it's not only information from government departments, from the Pentagon, from the 18 units within military intelligence, because much of the work surrounding the legacy program, now this is the reverse engineering program, the scientific and research program that exists to analyze materials obtained through UAP retrievals. Now, the existence of that department and that program has been officially within public knowledge for 7 years, since 2019. And we have heard from scientists working on the programs. We've heard from Jacques Vallée, Gary Nolan, Eric W. Davis. They've been allowed to brief the press concerning their work on materials obtained from UAPs. That work has been delegated to them by the corporations of the aerospace industry, what President Eisenhower called the military-industrial complex. And so that means covert units operating under the aegis of companies like Boeing, Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Skunk Works. These companies are the ones who have the contracts to pursue the R&D surrounding UAP retrievals. And they are covered by layer upon layer of official secrets laws. These are special access programs. And many of these programs will be programs unknown to units within the military intelligence community and certainly unknown to the President of the United States of America. So unraveling all of that, getting units and agencies whose whole job, whose raison d'etre is to gather secrets and keep secrets, to get them suddenly to share all their secrets seems unlikely. So what can we expect to be revealed? I think what's going to happen, and it will be significant, is that information already in the public domain will be presented by more authoritative voices. For instance, from the initial assessment paper presented to the US Senate in 2021, and from the July 26th hearing, the Congressional House Oversight Subcommittee hearing, July 26th, 2023, we know that there are entire craft that have been obtained by military intelligence. Entire craft, non-human biologics, and pilots, All this information was shared in that hearing with the permission of DOPSA, which is the Department of Defense agency responsible for pre-publication security review. Cleared also by ISIG, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community. The existence of that information concerning craft, pilots, non-human biologics, all-domain anomaly, that's craft that can fly through space, through the air and underwater, all that could be acknowledged publicly in 2023. So that information is out there. We've also heard from people in other countries, people who are 1 degree removed from the official making an official statement. And so we heard from Brigadier General Hayam Eshed. Now he, for 28 years, was Israel's chief of space security. It was his job to know if we were in contact and if that constituted any kind of a threat. And he made a public statement just a couple of Christmases ago saying that on the basis of his 28 years of privileged information, his belief was that we are in contact, that we have been in contact for more than 80 years, that takes us back to Eisenhower and Truman, and that there has been collaboration going on, a sharing of some technology, essentially seeing if we can reproduce what they are able to manufacture, the technology that allows them to travel interstellar distances. So he made that statement, and he's been under house arrest ever since. We also heard from the former Prime Minister of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who said that there's a dossier presented to every successive Prime Minister of Russia detailing the extraterrestrial civilizations with whom we're already in contact. We heard from the former Minister of Defense for Canada, Paul Hellyer. We heard from the former Chief of French Intelligence, Alain Juillet. We heard from the former Chief of the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, Luis Elizondo. We heard from the former Assistant Secretary of Defense for Presidents Clinton and George W. Bush. I'm talking about Chris Mellon. All these people are 1 degree removed from being the official in the position making an official statement. So what I think is going to happen in the weeks ahead is all that information that has come into the public domain, those of the 42 witnesses who in 2023 had made sworn statements to the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community regarding craft, biologics, pilots. We've heard from more of these people. I think all that information is going to be repeated, but repeated by the Secretary of War, by the President of the United States of America, so that this information is not only out there, but it's being endorsed at a higher level. I'm not expecting new disclosures. I'm really just expecting an authentication of the disclosures already made. Now, in my book, The Invasion of Eden, I suggest that this is not the first moment of disclosure the human race has known. Our ancestors talked about contact with non-human others in the deep past. And in my Books of the Eden series, I talk about scriptures in the Bible, the Hebrew scriptures, which talk about Elohim and Bene Elohim, non-human, powerful beings who intersected with human society in the deep past. I talk about the Dingir and the Anunnaki and the Igigi of the ancient Mesopotamian stories from out of ancient Sumer, Babylonia, Arcadia, and Assyria. I talk about the stories of the feathered serpents from the Guatemala Maya, the story of the Mo'o from out of Hawaii, the story of Abasi and Atai told by the Efik people of Nigeria. There are stories all around the world that say that we have had contact all through human history. And some of that contact has been exploitative, but some has been extremely important. And if you're sitting there thinking, should I be worried? Should I be worried that we're about to be invaded, and that's why this announcement is being made? I would encourage you to get grounded in ancient story. Get grounded in the stories our ancestors told. And in my most recent book, The ENIGMA, I show that there have been moments when human survival has hung in the balance. In the ages that followed the most recent ice age, the Younger Dryas Cold period, I argue that ancient carvings found in the Armenian highlands tell a story in which non-human others came and supported human progress in that critical moment. The same story is there in Zoroastrian story. The same story is there in ancient Assyrian carvings and in carvings all around the world. So if you're feeling anxious and need reassuring, let me recommend my book, The ENIGMA, and it will tell you that we have always lived in a populated cosmos. We've always had contact. This is not something to panic about. We have friends in high places. But one of the less predictable elements that comes with disclosure is the question of, so who are we? If we are in a populated cosmos, who are we? Are we part of a wider family? And if we're part of a world that has had contact in the deep past, who exactly is governing us? Who and in whose interests? And this is where the question of contact and the question of the Epstein Files cross over, because right now a lot of people want to know, who are these people who seem to have such incredible international authority, who are bound together by dark habits of sadism and cruelty? And is there any connection between them and the ancient stories told by our ancestors? In The Invasion of Eden, I suggest that the best way forward for humanity is accountability on all these things. I want the light of scrutiny to be shone on the Epstein Files and all those that they implicate. I want the light of accountability to be shone on the legacy program so that you and I can know what technology is available to humanity and who is making decisions for us, on what basis, and in whose interest. Will the process of disclosure get there? President Trump points to the identifying and releasing of government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life. That really is an acknowledgement that alien and extraterrestrial life is a reality. It's not a myth, it's not a conspiracy theory, it's something that merits serious study. And it will raise questions of who are we really? What are we really capable of, technologically and as a society? And if you read my books, The Invasion of Eden and The ENIGMA, you will see that I'm in fact tremendously optimistic about what is possible for us in collaboration with our galactic neighbors. When I look at the carvings left behind by the Iron Age Urartian people who occupied what today is Armenia and Turkey, they longed for the return of their non-human neighbors because they looked forward to what technology sharing would mean for them. They saw that as technology vital to the story of humanity, and they longed for more technology to be shared. I have that same appetite based on my study of ancestral stories and my reading of the state of contact and disclosure in the 21st century. President Trump says he wants us to have access to any and all information connected with these complex matters. And so we might be asking questions like, why are our businesses struggling with power bills if zero-point power is possible? Why do 8,000 old age pensioners in Britain freeze to death every year? That's the official statistics of the National Bureau of Statistics for the United Kingdom. Why do 8,000 people freeze to death every year if free energy is available? That again raises the question of who has this information, who's making the decisions, and in whose interests. I have an old-fashioned belief in democracy, and so I believe the more scrutiny that we can give to these matters, the more light we can shine upon them, the better. The more information you and I have, the better. And so I do see it as good news that President Trump is setting this agenda. I'm not 100% optimistic that the problems of compartmentalization of information within the military intelligence community is going to be solved by fiat from the president, but at least we can begin moving in that direction. I'll be following this story closely on The Fifth Kind and on the Paul Wallis channel. If you need to catch up with this topic, let me recommend The Invasion of Eden and the Eden Enigma. If this information is disrupting your theology, because your theology depends on the universe being empty, then I'll point you to the Eden conspiracy. I've been working, trying to get this information out there so that nobody needs to be shocked and horrified or disturbed or perplexed or disoriented by this kind of information. There is no need. We've been in contact for a very long time in a somewhat stable arrangement, but right now, what has been known behind closed doors and by those of us who've been following the public story closely, needs to be more widely known. My own background is in the world of Christian ministry. I was for 33 years in church-based ministry. I worked as a theological educator, a church doctor, and an archdeacon, that's one down from a bishop, for the Anglican Church in Australia. And it was through my work of studying the history of Christian thought and probing the translation of the key words of the Bible that another story began opening up for me. And when I got into the root meanings of the key words, I realized that the Bible carries vital information left behind by our ancestors. It is just one of many narrative traditions that places the human race within a wider cosmic family. And there are layers and layers to that story. You and I need to know that we are part of a wider cosmic family, and we need to begin thinking through the implications of that. Information is going to be repeated that may be new to you or your friends or family, and we need to be ready to have those conversations, whether we are people of faith, whether we are humanists, whatever culture or nation we're part of. This is information that belongs to humanity, and the implications of it are for the whole of humanity. So I want to encourage this conversation. I will be here in the comments on the Paul Wallis channel and on The Fifth Kind. We are having deep dives into the implications of these topics in my online learning community, Ancient Knowledge Academy. If you want to go and see the ancient carvings that tell these stories, come with me to Turkey in October, and I'll be taking a group to ancient sites where this information is carved into basalt. But in the words of Douglas Adams, don't panic. Our ancestors have known this information for a very, very long time, and the implications of it carry the potential for us to chart a better way forward as a human civilization on planet Earth. I welcome the possibility that we might have a more informed relationship, all of us, with our cosmic neighbors, and I look forward to the information that is going to flow from President Trump's announcement. So thank you for joining me today. I'll be there in the comments to continue the conversation, and I'll see you on The Fifth Kind, Ancient Knowledge Academy, and if you can come with me to Turkey, I'll see you there. Wishing you health and peace.